Our own mind has to be changed. We have to change our mind about ourselves.
In what way?
A knowledge of self. If we could be cured of our slave mentality that was indoctrinated into us during slavery, we would realize that just as the white man can do these things for himself and his kind, we can get together in unity and harmony and do the same thing for ourselves and our kind.
Welcome to another episode of the Blueprint for Black Power podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brother Dre. With me, I got my brother Kenyatte Sharif and my other brother Rashad Sekou. How we doing today?
All right.
All right, brothers. We are now on episode 10, and we are moving into the second chapter of this phenomenal book. This chapter is titled Bases of Power. So all of the first chapter was really dealing with different forms of power that the European uses on us as a nation, as Black people in America, but also uses on the world as a whole in his pursuit to gain world domination and world power. So we talked about different forms of power relating to force, coercion, manipulation, influence, competence, legitimacy, all these different forms of power that are used to keep us in a mental state of subjection and ignorance. So we highly recommend that you go back and watch some of those videos related to that. There's about 9 videos. There's exactly 9 videos in all, just going over the different material in chapter 1. Now we are finally moving into chapter 2, where we're going to start to talk about how this power is established, its foundation. Again, you have this power, but it needs some sort of a home base or a platform from which it operates from. All right, so we're going to go over and talk about some of that. But before we jumped into that, I wanted to talk or to go over this quote that he has written, or I guess spoken by Alvin Toffler from his book Power Shift. And he opens up the chapter with this quote where it says, "Overconcentration of power resources is dangerous. Underconcentration of power resources is equally as dangerous. Conflict is an inescapable social fact. Power struggles are not necessarily bad." And I thought that was very powerful. I thought that was very deep. First and foremost, to understand that whenever a people or peoples, whenever you have a group of people that have too much power, over concentration of power, that can be extremely dangerous, because more often than not, history shows us that people are going to use that power in an unfair way. And the same is true whenever you have people that have too little power. They usually find themselves in positions where they're abused by those who have too much power. Okay, so having too much or too little is never good. It's all about balance. It's all about having balance, right? It's not about one person overpowering another. It's about bringing balance to the universe and learning how to work collectively together, but everybody respecting who and what they are as individuals and as a nation, right? And then he goes on to say that conflict is an inescapable social fact. So in order to achieve this balance, there's always going to be conflict. Right, as we begin to grow our power position, as we begin to change our minds and we gravitate towards establishing power for ourselves, economically, politically, and what have you, there is going to be that struggle, because this threatens the current paradigm that the European has established. And naturally, when faced with that sort of an opposition, there's going to be conflict, right? So that's to be expected, but that's not a bad thing. Oftentimes, and I think what scares a lot of Black people is the idea of that conflict, knowing that the white man has so much resources when it comes to military power and so on and so forth, that scares people from wanting to engage in that conflict. But we have to understand that conflict is not bad. Conflict is a part of growth itself, right? It's a part of life. And we know what we deserve as a people. We know what rightfully, belongs to us, as far as we believe in equality. We believe that we should have more access to to resources so that we can have, the best of health, the best of education, the best of the things that we need in order to thrive as human beings, in order for the planet to even thrive, right? So knowing these things, we have to understand that it's worth the conflict, right? It's worth the going up against the opposition in order to bring about these things. And we also believe that in due time, even the conflict itself will understand that, you know what I mean? But growth is about, being in a state of ignorance, bumping heads, having to war, it's all a part of growth for any society, for the world itself. So I really thought that was a powerful quote, just really to, again, that conflict, is inescapable as a social fact. Can't avoid it. You know what I mean?
No, you can't at all. And I appreciate you saying that because, again, brother, when we talk about inescapable, we have been conditioned to avoid conflict.
Absolutely.
Okay? Because, again, we get terms like reverse racism, which is some made up term by the European. And again, once you hear that word, you're kind of like, okay, am I being racist? But if you understand the definition of racism, you'll know that you're not being racist. What you're doing is trying to fight for some type of equal ground, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we want to run away from any type of conflict because we think it's going to be, like I say, in our worst interest, because we think we might get murdered or locked up or thrown in jail or whatever the case may be. So we just kind of go with the status quo and just say we don't want any problems. But we have to have some conflict if we're going to do this battle.
Right. It's like being bullied on the playground, right? So long as you avoid the bully, you're always going to get bullied.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. You don't want to fight. You're not a troublemaker, but you understand that the only way that bully's going to leave you alone is you eventually got to stand your ground. You can run your entire life, but until you stand your ground, that bully or bullies will always be there. Right. You run from that bully, you'll run from bullies your entire life.
And Brother Amos Wilson made a point. He quoted, he said, when you fight for power, you're going to insult the European. Now, he said the word insult because he said he's going to take it as an insult because you're fighting for your own power in the paradigm, like you said, has been that, okay, it's pure white male domination. So he says, you're going to insult some people, which is you're going to cause conflict. So you can't be afraid to tell your truth in the face of, not lies.
Right. And even going along with that, they think about it, the white man in his power and his arrogance believes that he knows what's best for the world. You know what I mean? So when he's fighting you, he's even fighting saying, you don't know what's best for you. If I allow you to gain control, everything is going to go out of control, which when you look at it, everything's already out of control. You know what I mean? Everything's way out of control with the way that the European has been running things, but they still, in their pride and their arrogance and their knowledge, think that they know so much that no one else should be in the position of power that they're in. So there's got to be conflict. You know what I mean? They're going to defend what they think or they believe is right. And we have to defend what we believe is right. You know what I mean? And let the universe kind of work it out, which it will. You know what I mean? Because the universe is always working its way back towards balance itself anyway. So the conflict cannot be avoided. Amazing, just quote to kind of open up the chapter with, I thought, so he did a really good job with that. But that is, think about it. That is what the base of power, or I should say, instead of just saying that is what it is, kind of when you read the first paragraph of the second chapter, he really establishes what power is built on. You know what I mean? You have to have access to some sort of resources that people want and people need. And if you have control of that, you essentially have control of the people. You know what I'm saying? If you think about it on a rudimentary level, think about when you was a kid, and maybe you had a toy or some candy or whatever like that. You kind of control your friends a little bit. Like, I'm not going to give you some of this unless you do that.
That's right.
You can't have that, you know what I mean? That was your power source. You know what I mean? I got this and you want it. Now I'm going to, kind of control everybody. You know what I mean? If you were that type of friend. But on a rudimentary level, it's the same thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where they have access to these different, not only do they have access, to the money and wealth, but they also control the system that kind of dominates the way that we operate and think. And so they control that system, and that there's the power. It's not really so much controlling a thing as much as it is controlling a mindset. Control, like he says in here, controlling the relationship between people. You know, but you know what I'm saying? So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, because it's just going on what you're saying with the mindset, because they deal in a lot of abstract and concepts. Okay. And again, just doing history, we were not brought here to think conceptually. We were brought here to labor.
Right.
We were brought here to work. So that's where we are sometimes when we think, okay, this, and again, as we get deeper into this chapter, we'll start seeing what we're talking about when we get into the politics of it and see, you know, why are we so complacent with just having a job for a job's sake? It's not power.
Right.
Okay? We're not in ownership type of thing. We haven't been taught that. That's not our paradigm, you see. So we're going to get into those things, but I just wanted to talk about that one point.
No, definitely. I'm sorry, Kenyatte, did I cut you off?
No. But I was going to say off of what Rashad said that in that sense, what we as Black people, what we always looking for is some type of security. So regardless of if we're not really trying to own the business, we just want to work for the company because we want to be secure, and that's it.
That's it. And so long as we have that, so long as we trust in this system that was established for us, and we do not try to think of any sort of a system for our own selves, we will always be in subjection to this power. You know what I mean? We've got to start thinking in terms of how do we establish our own power? How do we, like we talked about before a couple of weeks ago, how do we gain our minds back? You know what I mean? Because that's ideally what's most important. You know, how do you can only reverse this relationship by first, you got to change the way that you think and the way that you behave. That's the first steps, I believe, to changing this power structure relationship, where again, you have the European that has access to all of these resources. You know what I mean? Whether we're talking about wealth, whether we're talking about property, whether we're talking about business or what have you, but that is because they control the way that we think. And also too, they control what we do with the resources when we do have it. You know what I mean? Like in the latter part, he says something really deep, and I just want to go to, we're in chapter 2, page 28. And he says, this is the latter part of the first paragraph, the very last sentence. And you know, this brother has some long sentences, so it's kind of like halfway into the paragraph. But it says, a power relationship and the inequality between the parties in such a relationship presupposes that the weaker party either lacks appropriate power resources or relatively fewer of them, or if he possesses them, does not possess the will and or the ability to employ them effectively in his interests. So in order for you to have this power relationship, either the people that you're exercising your power over, either they can't have the resource or they have very little of it, or when they do have access to it, that's the part I really wanted to hit on, they don't know what to do with it.
What to do with it?
They have no idea what to do with it. Just to share a story with you, I might have shared this with you guys already, but I was talking to a jeweler, a guy out here in Atlanta that sells jewelry or what have you. And he was working at one point for a white establishment. I want to say it was Jared or something like that. And he was very good at doing his job. And because he was so good at doing his job, he kind of built a reputation. And another jeweler in Atlanta wanted to get him to work for his business. So he brings him in for an interview, pretty much gives him an offer that he can't refuse, and he goes ahead and he takes this job. Now, this other jewelry store in Atlanta is called Icebox. It's the only one in Atlanta. You probably heard of it. It's the place where all the rappers, all the celebrities go to spend their money. So this brother, when he gets to work in there, he's blown away because he's like, you know, at Jared, every Jared store, we do about 3 to 4 million a year. He's like, over here, we're doing about 3 to 4 million a month. You know what I'm saying? And he's like, these young cats, these young rappers, they come in with duffel bags of money. and they'll spend upwards of $100,000-$200,000 in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You got gold watches, gold chains on both wrists. You know, all what I'm saying is you have all this money. You know what I mean? Especially when we talk about the youth, we talk about the young hip hop generation. You're talking about thousands and millions of dollars that you have. And instead of you taking that money and figuring out how you can build and establish a nation, the only thing that you really understand and know what to do is to buy and give it back to the European that gave it to you. You know what I mean? Like, right. And again, not trying to bash anybody or anything like that, but even Kanye West, he came out with an album just recently, and one of the lyrics that he said in the album really stuck out to me. He talked about how he bought a $60 million home and he never set foot in it. You know what I'm saying? But he's a billionaire, so he can, you know what I mean? But that's the whole point that he's making. He's saying, I have so much money that I can just waste $60 million like that. And it's like, okay, but why wouldn't you take that $60 million and build a neighborhood? Take that $60 million and build a school. Maybe Dr. Umar Johnson, someone that's trying to do something positive for Black children, maybe you could help out with $1 million or $2 million or what have you. Again, there's different ways that we can use this money to build nation, to build, you know, to build ourselves, but we don't do that. One person gets money, and because they don't know what to do with it, they just splurge, they just spend. So yeah. I just thought that that was kind of deep, not to go on too long, but when I read that and just kind of thinking about, you know, that whole story about the young men going into the jewelry store and splurging and spending all this money indiscriminately, it kind of made me think, you know, we have the resources, we have the land, we have access, we just don't have the mental capacity to put it all together and bring something about.
Yes. Yeah. And Brother Amos Wilson speaks on that a lot because he talks about the oil industry, and he says, when we send our children to college, they don't need the same education as the European. He said, you're going to college because you're getting the basics. You need more than the basics. He says, when you travel and you want to get a college degree in whatever it's called when you're dealing with the oil industry, he says, you know, once you graduated college, now you got to figure out what infrastructure, okay? You got to figure out how to get the oil out of the ground. You got to figure that out. How do you ship the oil with the tanker? It's those things that we don't get taught. So again, he talks about power from a saying of, okay, you and the white man go to the same college, but get y'all coming out to college with two different educations. You just think you got the education that he got, but he already, his people are already in position to get the oil out of the ground. They have tankers. We don't have any tankers. We don't have the way to get the oil out of the ground, but you think you got the same education as him? That's when he talks about powerlessness. And that's exactly how we go to school, we have an education, but we don't know how to get the oil out the ground.
Exactly. And as we all know, when I'm sorry, Kenyatte, you gonna say something?
No, I was gonna say no. That's definitely on point right there.
Definitely. And think about this. We all know when you graduate college, that's where your real education comes. Once you get on the job, that's where you know what I'm saying? So just going back to your point, what you have is you have a lot of white kids, black kids are graduating college and going to just a regular job where you get instructions and do this and that. Whereas a lot of your white Europeans are getting the instructions of, like you said, how to do this. Right. We're putting you in the engineering position where we can show you how to extract oil or whatever it is that you need to do. Whereas as just your regular black employee, you're learning how to press certain buttons.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? You're learning how to take orders.
You was mentioning, I think a couple of weeks ago, you had mentioned something about particular schools where these prestigious type of children go there and they're there to learn particular things.
Yeah.
Well, once again, I mean, when you're talking about, who's going to run these things, I mean, they already have these things established.
Exactly.
To where so many black people, they don't even, that doesn't even cross their mind because they haven't been taught anything like that.
Right.
So, with that, you've got our people just thinking that, if you work really hard, you can get to this. And it doesn't look like that.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, think about it. They sell us, they got to sell us on the dream, but America's not stupid. The people that are running this country, running this world, they're not leaving it up to just pure happenstance. Like, who's going to be the next president? We don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
Anybody can be, you know what I mean? They don't leave it up to just pure chance. You know what I mean? That's not the way that they run the government. They run the world. So yeah, there's a lot of planning as far as, look, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate people available to be in certain positions when they become of age, and as the older generation gets older and they have to step down from their positions. So people know what to do when they get into positions of politics and power and things like that, how to make sure that the oligarchy maintains their control.
Absolutely. And if you go down about halfway down to page 28, in the middle of page 28, he brings out a good point. Because when we talk about the schools, which we all know schools is politics, okay?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Black politics and activism without the Black ownership of control, about Black ownership of and control over primary forms and bases of power such as property, wealth, organization, etc., is the recipe for Black political and non-political powerlessness. Mm-hmm. So what he's saying is, guess what? We got these Black politicians and we got Blacks head of school boards and we got all these people, but what do we own? We're not being taught how to own anything. We're not talking about infrastructure. We're not talking about those things. So again, we as Black people are on symbolism. Now we have, a Black vice president, woman, and that's cool, but that's a symbol. That's what exactly do we own? What political power do we have? You see, and that's where he's going with that.
Exactly. They're controlling us with the images. You know what I mean? Like, again, what we talked about weeks ago, we got so excited when President Barack Obama got elected back in 2008. You literally had people out in the streets crying, breaking down, as you had brought out, K Boogie, people saying that they never thought I would see the day, which tells you right then and there that something's wrong with the system if you never thought you'd see the day. But still, what was accomplished from there? You still got Black people dying in the street. You still have inequality as far as the economy is concerned. You still have all these problems. And you keep getting Black people in these positions of power, like President Barack Obama, and they keep pacifying us. Like, I even remember, matter of fact, Obama was on LeBron James' show, The Shop. Okay. He had him in for an interview and they were sitting there talking politics. And that's essentially what Obama was still saying. He was acknowledging that, of course, there's still inequalities, amongst Black people within America, but he's taken the pacifist approach of, we got to wait, right? He said it took 300 years for us to get here. We're not going to rectify it all in 50 years. We get that, but you're not going to rectify it at all using a system that was designed not to rectify, not to correct it, to keep you in the position, you know what I'm saying? Yes. A system that was designed to keep you down. So, but again, you have people like that are good at pacifying us, because like we always talk about, because Obama is so good at rhetoric, he's so good at being persuasive, we'll watch a show like that and say, yeah, the brother's got a point. You know what I mean? We're not going, fix it all in 350 years. So I guess we just need to just, keep on plugging along and just doing as we do, and you don't do anything. Right. That's complacency. Right. It lulls you right to sleep.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. And you have so many of our Black leaders that do just that.
Yeah.
Right. That's,
you know what I'm saying?
So true.
Definitely. I wanted to jump to another thing that he says in 28 too, just going right along with this. He says, because he talks about power, and he says these power resources, when he talks about the power, well, let me start from the top, actually, just to kind of give us a little bit of context. It says, we have no intentions to review the quite sizable number of possible power bases here. There's a whole bunch of power bases between, what is power, what's not, that we can refer to. But I like the fact that Amos Wilson just wants to narrow it down to very few specific ones related to the just the inequality between Europeans and Blacks. So we shall constrain ourselves to brief but pertinent discussions of those power resources which are of important relevance to African American and the power relations between them and European Americans. And then he goes on to say this, which I think is very potent. It says these power resources include property, organization, race consciousness, and ideology. I like those. I'll repeat them again. Property, organization, race consciousness, and ideology. Although I do believe that if we're talking about in order of importance, they actually should go backwards. It should actually be ideology, race consciousness, organization, which will ultimately include or lead to the acquisition of more property and resources or what have you. But first and foremost, we have to have a common ideology. You know what I mean? And when you look up the word ideology itself is a system of ideas and ideals, especially one which forms the basis of economic or political theory and policy. As Black people, we don't have a common ideology. We have the white man's ideology,
Right.
you know what I mean? But we don't have our own ideology. What does our economic system look like?
We don't have
We don't have one. What does our political system look like?
We don't have
We don't have one. You know what I mean? What does our educational system look like?
We don't have one.
We have no ideology.
Right.
So we have to start with understanding the importance of an ideology, which then leads to also understanding the importance of race consciousness. You know what I mean? As you were talking about, Rashad, whenever it comes to Black people and Black people focusing on race, we're always discouraged from doing so. And they try to use, like you had brought out, Rashad, words like reverse racism. Oh, you're focusing too much on Black nationalism. That's reverse racism. No, it's not. Every nation has something unique within that nation, within that culture to offer to the planet, to offer to other people. And it's no different from Black people as well. You know what I'm saying? We as a nation of people, we have our own culture. We have something that is relevant to the planet that we have to, we have to recognize who we are as a people. You know what I'm saying? And understand what our position and what our role is. And then, make ourselves, useful. In other words, you know what I'm saying? Assume our rightful position. And I personally believe, some people can disagree, but I personally believe that the Black man and woman are the original kings and queens of this earth. Now, that doesn't put you in a position where you can look condescendingly on other people, because we also understand that the greatest king is the greatest servant. We're the ones that are responsible for actually bringing balance back to the universe. But if we're not in our rightful position to do so, that's impossible to do so. You know what I'm saying? And we all have to work collectively together in order to do that. You know what I mean? The body is not a great melting pot in a sense of your organs are not just all just doing what they want to do. Everything has its proper position. And it's no different with nations. Every nation kind of has their proper position and what they can do to contribute to the overall balance of the earth. And I think that's important for us to understand as well. Sorry for rambling.
No, you made a good point, brother. And I want to go back to that because, again, I want to focus. And this book will focus and teach us. It will teach us how to go about forming an ideology for the entire race.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. Again, when you put it in the context of the U.S. or even the world, it's seen and it's heard. When you put it on media, it's heard as a bad thing that Black people want to come together. What's the problem with that? So again, I want us to focus and get our people to understand there is an ideology that we need to create.
Exactly.
Follow based on Brother Amos Wilson's book. And that's the whole importance of the book, to get the ideology first, and then the other stuff will fall into place.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with having an ideology because you have an ideology already as an American.
Right.
You follow the American ideology.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Capitalism, individuality, going, the holidays that you keep and everything that you do is all a part of the American ideology. A lot of people are coming around to Thanksgiving, Black Friday. That's all part of the American ideology.
And their ideology is to have us in a consumer position all the time. There's no problem with their ideology as long as Black people are buying everything.
Exactly.
As long as we're not producing anything and we're just buying, their ideology is like, that's fine. But if we talk about producing something, producing our own cars or anything, okay, then it's a problem. All of a sudden, that was versus Black national, all these words you come up with. But again, as long as we're buying stuff like you talked about, the celebrities buying $200,000 worth of diamonds, and where the diamond mines? Where's that
Exactly.
stuff come from?
Exactly.
Well, we can't get on that. We gotta just be consumers and just consume and consume. That's all. As long as we do that, then they have no problem with the ideology. But if we say, well, you know what, we want to mine our diamonds ourselves.
Now you got a problem.
Now you got a
problem.
Now you got a problem.
Conflict. Right.
Now you got a conflict. Now you're talking about war. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we've seen this, we've got history to look at. Well, we see this so often when you have, like we talk about the nations in Africa, when they kind of say they want to start doing their own thing, boom. And that's where now you got a dictator that needs to be dethroned. And, you got, all this other chaos that's created because you want to discourage that type of thinking. And that doesn't just happen in Africa. We've seen that examples of that in South America. We've seen examples of that all throughout the UK, all throughout the world.
Yeah.
India, all throughout the world.
Yeah.
Wherever somebody is trying to jump up and impose and threaten that paradigm, like we talked about from the very beginning, you're going to meet that opposition.
Yes. So
we cannot be afraid of that. We cannot allow that to discourage us or turn us away from developing our own ideology. And I'm very excited to get into those chapters later on, where Amos really starts to break it down and go into detail of how that is possible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good that we have, you know what I'm saying, our ideologies, you know what I mean? And what we got to also realize too is that, as far as certain things, we have to cut ourselves from. We can't be caught up. We can't be caught up in their politics.
That's
and
right.
Brother Amos definitely brought that out. You can't be caught up in their politics because certain things, it may look like it's in our favor, but it's not in our favor. Mm-hmm. You might put certain people in a position. Once again, you're just looking the part, but is it beneficial to Black people or Black communities, Black education, Black economics? No. Right. All of it's still structured to where we are still always being a part of their establishment. Mm-hmm. And that's the part where we got to get out of. Exactly. Our ideologies, our ideas have to be different from what these people are trying to make us be a part of.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Brother.
There's got to be a complete shift of the mind, because you can't build on something that's already corrupt. Again, we talk about it all the time. America was established on genocide. They were established on enslavement. They was established on brutality. It was established on deceit. You can't build something on something that's just such an unsound foundation. No. You got to tear that down. You know what I mean? It has to be torn down, and it has to be rebuilt in a way that is fair and equal to all. You know what I mean? So that all people can thrive. You know what I'm saying? And the European has clearly proven that they're not in the position to do that, because they're so drunken and greedy with their own power and ambition for control that the consequences of their actions are not a concern to them. And the afflictions that they bring about on other people, Black people. But really, I mean, like I said, I was checking out that documentary, and not to get too off topic, but you had sent something a couple of weeks ago, Kenyatte, when you were talking about just the way that we're bombing these people on Bikini Island. Mm-hmm. And most of us would say, well, where's Bikini Island? Exactly. Because nobody knows where it is, because it's in between Hawaii and Japan. Nobody knows where they are. They just took it upon themselves to bomb these people, bomb just after bomb, just test them. They were bombing every single day. And then the people had to evacuate their land. But then they allowed the people to come back to their land, even though they knew the
land was still jacked up.
Exactly. Knowing the land was contaminated with radiation, but they did it because they wanted to experiment on humans and see what is the effect of radiation on human beings over a period of time. And you can do this because nobody knows where Bikini Island is. Right. Nobody cares. You know what I'm saying? This is why they don't want to have critical race theory in school, by the way, because they don't want kids learning stuff like this. Exactly. They don't want kids learning stuff like this. What they've done to get to the position that they are. So you can't build on that. You can't. Why do you need? I can't be a president or a governor or anything like. You can't build on that. It has to be reestablished. It has to be torn down and rebuilt completely. You know what I'm saying?
When you look at the news today and everybody's bringing up the conversation about CRT, critical race theory, I mean, if you listen to some of these comments, that these people are saying, you know, to where they just want it to be to where, listen, I'm an American, you're an American, and our belief should be about, you know, being one country, and you know, God loves us. You know what I mean? We proud of our military. As long as we think on the same concept as you, you know what I mean? And forget about everything that happened in the past.
Right.
You feel what I'm saying? Then it's like, okay, then you consider me to be a good American. But because I want to look back at the whole origin of this whole thing and understand, you know what I mean, why are my people always in this kind of position and your people are where they are, then guess what? Then you have to get deep into these things.
Exactly.
And you're going to find out a lot of things that, you know, I mean, throughout history itself, I mean, not just America's history, just history itself, man, that, you know, these people are nothing but rape, robbers, and murderers.
And not to delve off too much, but going along with your point, Kenyatte, that's why a lot of white Americans don't even understand the conflict that America has with other nations.
Right.
We're taught to just look at every other nation like they're these violent terrorist enemies that are just trying to attack America. And it's really, no, America came into our land and destroyed our children, or destroyed our property, or, you know what I mean? People are fighting back. They're angry. They're upset. It's retaliation. It's not attack. It's retaliation or defense.
And what Brother Amos Wilson says on page 29 is relating to what y'all are talking about when you talk about these wars and such, because in the, again, probably the third sentence on page 29, the activities of Black politicians, given the current inadequacy of social organizations and economic resources, harmfully distract the Black community's attention from recognizing and eradicating the true causes of its problems, okay, and the remediation of powerlessness.
There you go.
Because guess what? We're falling for what we call a counterplay in football. You're going showing us one thing, but we're really doing this. And again, when you put the Black politicians, what he's saying, when you put the Black faces up there, you think, okay, then they have our best interests at heart. But we're missing the big picture as a people. We're not seeing the big picture. Okay? Right. It's a whole lot of murder and stuff that goes on. And just because you put a Black politician up there, we think, okay, well, we must be progressing.
Exactly. I mean, how many Black politicians have we had? You know what I mean? And where's the progress?
I mean, I mean, we were talking in the beginning of the meeting. I mean, just think about it. All the ways from you had a Black president, Barack Obama. You got Vice President Kamala Harris. You know what I mean? Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. Attorney General by Eric Holder. You know, Supreme Court Judge Clarence Thomas. I mean, you've got all these so-called high established Black folks representing us, and from any one of these being in office, I mean, what has it really gotten us? I mean, God forbid, you know, it's crazy, but more Black people died under the hands of the police while Barack Obama was in office than any other president there was.
It's crazy.
And here we thought when he came in the office that, you know, you're gonna open up these doors and make sure Black people are all right. And that was nothing but a facade. Right. Because you opened up the floodgates and made it okay to let these people go around and kill all these Black people.
And Brother Amos Wilson has made that comment several times in this book and on videos. He always says, you look at the statistics. Every time a Black person, politician, mayor, or something like that takes over the city, the statistics go in a bad favor.
Yes.
And it's set up like that because, again, we like symbolism, so we want a Black mayor in our city, but then all of a sudden the crime rate all of a sudden goes up. And then you
Yep.
bring a white one in and the crime rate goes down. We don't understand we're being set up. So again, having a politician in office doesn't help us do anything. But again, that's what Brother Amos Wilson is trying to get us to understand. He went to his grave with that understanding. If y'all would open your eyes, if we would open our eyes and see that, we would get off the symbolism and go for real power.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
The man was a genius. The man really was a genius.
He really was. He really was, man. And I love the fact that, again, it's really going to start breaking down the methods, the how-tos, you know what I mean? So that we can start talking about solutions to these ongoing problems. And so that pretty much, I think, wraps it up for this section. You know what I mean? I think we caught most of it. Next week is the section where we start to go into property as power. And we start talking about the importance of having property and how we can use property as a nation in our favor, what have you. So that's going to be next week. And I'm sorry, do we have anything else that we wanted to say on this section right here? I know we were pretty good. We're pretty okay. All right. So yeah. So next week, we're going to be going into property and power. I said property as power. Is going to be called property and power is that next section. So we highly encourage you guys to join us next week. I will include a section of the reading below. So for those of you that do not have the book, you will be able to follow along. But if you do not have the book, as always, we do encourage you, go out and get it. The name of the book is called The Blueprint for Black Power, written by the late, great Dr. Amos Wilson. You can purchase it on the family website, which is AfricanWorldInfosystems.com. I believe the money and proceeds still goes to the Wilson family. So highly recommend that you go ahead and buy that book. There's a lot of information in there. You will not regret it. It's not something that you can read overnight. There is 800 pages. It's a long book, but we're talking about a massive situation, something that's not going to be resolved overnight, but it will be resolved so long as we remain faithful and we remain devoted to our cause. Just got to believe in ourselves, believe in our own power. And I think that's what we have is a lot of lack of belief in our own power, but that's by design. That's not necessarily all our fault. That's by design. So we just, again, it's about rechanging and reshifting the mind and getting our minds back. So until then, I say peace and love. And brothers, any last words?
Peace.
Peace.
Peace. See you guys next week. Take care.
Our own mind has to be changed. We have to change our mind about ourselves. In what way? A knowledge of self.